All right, so in our last video, we were very clear what we were working on is the parent. And we saw that, or what we did was put different properties and values on our parent. We flexed our menu, which made it the parent. And so everything that is inside of it, the direct children, are going to be flexed. Not any grandchildren, just the children will be flexed. So now let's look at the children in W3 schools, and we're going to go to Flex Items. And in Flex Items, these are the styling that we can put on the children. So let's see how this works. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Let's see what we've got here. All right, so the first thing it talks about is, it's going to talk about order. So let's see what order is. The order property specifies the order of the Flex Items. And this is a little bit confusing, so let me see if I can help explain what's going on here. So it kind of makes sense to us that we're changing the order. So let me show you kind of the ins and outs of how this works. So let's say we're on box 3 and we want to change its order. So I'm going to give it order, and I'll say order 6 because I want it to be, I want to move it to the end. Okay, that seemed to work, right? Let's put 6, let's see, let's put it at position 3 and just, was it position 3? Let's put it at position 2 and see what happens. Okay, now I moved it to position 2, but it's still at the end. And that is really confusing because I tried to move it to the second position clearly. Well, the problem is, or the frustration, or the thing we don't think about is that if we look at the default and it says the order value must be a number, default value is all 0. So what's happening then is that all of these are 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and so this becomes 3, so all the zeros get to come before 3. So we have to keep that in mind when we're thinking about order. So as long as, like if I want 4 to come to the end, as long as I make it bigger than the 2, it's going to come over to the edge, right? Let me just verify that or prove that. So I'm going to make this order 3 now. And what you'll see is, since these are all 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, this is 2, this is 3. So if I make this one 4, then it should come to the other side of it, as you can see. So when you're looking at order, just remember that the default is 0, and so unless you reassign all of the other ones, you have to take into account that they're 0. Maybe if I want to, I think I can do this. I'm going to try and move 3 over behind 1. Can I try that? Well, let's try a negative number. So let's try a negative 4 and see what that moves it to. Okay, so I can use negative numbers to move it to the other direction because negative 4 comes before 0. So that's kind of things to think about why I really mentioned the default, especially on this one. Remember that the default is 0 unless we change it. All right, so let's look at the next one. So we had order, excellent. The next one is the flex grow property. And the flex grow property says it specifies how much a flex item will grow relative to the rest of the flex items. Remember, flex items are the children. When we say the word items, we're talking about the children. This doesn't mean anything to me, so let's figure out how it works. It just says flex grow 1, and then there's 8. All right, so just to make things easy, I'm going to copy this flex grow 1. And the first thing I'm going to do for demonstration is I'm going to go to the box because all of them, remember, have a class box. So I'm going to go to class box and I'm going to add that flex grow 1 here. And what you're going to see is that they're all going to expand across the page. So I'm going to go back into my inspect tool and I want to show you how that's happening. So let's go back to the inspector and I'm going to go to layout. And what I want to show you is, let's go to our menu, and I'm going to start here. So I'm clicking on one of these boxes, and it says box 3. So when this box started, it was 113 pixels in width. Remember, we did that a little earlier in the last video. This box started out at 90 pixels in width, and this box started off, you get the point. So what's happening now is, when we say flex grow 1 to this box, what we're doing is for every single one of these, it's going to take whatever was the distance. So let me do this again. Let me take this off for the moment. And we'll say there was a distance here. There was a difference here of whatever pixels, this plus this plus this, 90 plus 113 plus all of these, and this empty space. So what will happen then is this empty space will be divided among 6. So divide this space by 6 and add it to what they were originally. So what that means is whatever that number is, let's see if we can kind of ascertain what it is here. So we can decide that 74 pixels is the amount that we are going to allocate to each element. And if I look at each of these, we're going to see that that number is not changing. See how they're all at 75, where I said 76, but 74. So they're all getting 74 pixels. So the browser took this space that was available, and whatever the element was to start with, this one started to be 90. Now it gets its piece of the pie, equal piece of the pie, which is 74. So now it's 165. So if you don't really want to understand that math, it's not a huge deal, but just recognize that what's happening with the grow is whatever that element was to start with, it's now getting some additional piece of the entire width of that window. And so by doing flex grow 1 on the box, that means all of them are growing equally. They've got equal parts of this share, and they're spreading across this page evenly. All right, but what happens if we do this? So I'm going to go to, randomly, it doesn't really matter which one, I'm going to box 6, and instead of flex grow 1, I'm going to give it a flex grow 2. So how is that going to behave differently? Well, let's see. So if I look at what's happening now, I'm going to move this out of the way here. So if I click on 6 now, what we should see is it got more. So it got twice as much. This one got 63 pixels. So this one then with the 2 is growing twice as fast. So 63, whatever it was, times 2 is 127. So now we can see that when we do flex grow 2, what we're saying is everybody's going to grow equally, but this one's going to grow twice as much as the other ones. So, I mean, the same thing can happen. If we do 4, for example, it's going to be quite a bit bigger. So we can see that changing, and we can see that it's getting 4 pieces of that pie, as opposed to the other ones that are only getting a smaller portion. So when we do flex grow, I put it on all of the boxes that had the box class, just so you can see that I spread them out all evenly. But you can affect a child independently. For example, box 6 only applies to box 6, and I can flex grow it as I need to, making it larger or smaller, depending on how much more I want it to shrink, or I'll do it shrink afterwards, but grow compared to the other elements, or its other sibling elements. All right, so along the same lines, there's also the flex shrink, which just means that it's going to shrink twice as fast as the others. It's going to get smaller faster than the ones around it. So I think that one might be pretty self-evident. One is going to grow faster, the other is going to shrink faster. But I'm going to move down here to this flex basis one. And what flex basis is doing is it's stating, let me just kind of put it in here. I don't know which one we'll put it on. I'll put it on 6 for no good reason. So what we're saying now is, remember when we looked at each of these individual ones and we decided that their content meant that they were, this one started off at 94 because that's how wide the content was, and then it got another 36 pixels added on because of the flex boxes. All right, but if we look at element 6, flex basis means this is a starting point. So instead of starting our value at the width of the content, remember the width of the content was the 90, whatever it was, 93. Now we're saying the basis, that width is always going to be 200 pixels and grow and shrink from this basis point rather than from the width. So this was the width. This is our basis point that we're going to add our extra space onto, our extra piece of the pie onto. But maybe sometimes we're going to say, we want this to always be 200 pixels, and it's going to grow and shrink from this value instead of from its width value. So that's what the basis is. And if you look farther down, then we have a flex property, which is a shorthand for all of them. So here you're going to see this is flex, and this is the grow value. This is the shrink value, and then this becomes the basis. So that's just a shortcut for all of them. So again, I'm going to not do the self-align property, align self property. I'm going to stop here, but that is a overview of flex boxes. Remember that we have to be aware of the parent. We're going to define the parent by using this display flex. the parent has its own properties, and each property has its own unique, but only limited to the values that are listed down here. And then the children then of the parent is going to be receiving their own properties and values.